Live from the SABC's Auckland Park studios, welcome to this Tuesday edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvogo, and on the show tonight, we sit down with the Deputy Finance Minister to talk governance in the local and provincial spheres of government, as well as at the multi-billion rand parastatal that he chairs. I should be saying multi-trillion rands, actually.
Any member who is interfering with the removal of those
Speaker, why are male security touching the female MP?
Speaker, you will account.
In a country like ours, with high incidence of violence and intimidation, where does our condemnation of violence start or end? Does it depend on who the violence is perpetrated against, whether we like the victims or not? And following the National Assembly Speaker's decision to disallow two opposition parties, the ATM and the UDM, to submit motions of asking for a probe into the president's farm saga, we ask what the decision means now that the ATM has actually resubmitted a new motion. Will that get the nod from the National Assembly Speaker now? All that and more in tonight's episode of The Watchdog, which starts right now. Substantial impropriety, poor and ineffective governance, inadequate oversight, confusion regarding the role and functions of the board, victimization of employees, a disregard for due process. Those are only some of the damning findings made a few years ago by the Mpati Commission of Inquiry into the Public Investment Corporation. Today, PIC executives and board members addressed Parliament about what they have been doing in the past couple of years to fix the asset management company that handles trillions of rands in investment funds. Dr. David Masondo, the Deputy Finance Minister, is the chairperson of the PIC board, and he joins me in studio. Good evening, sir. Thanks very much for coming through.
Thank you, Vuyo, for having me, and good evening to your listeners.
So, from what our journalists who were watching the presentation today saw, heard, you have a good story to tell.
Yes, we do. Usually our clients, that is the GPF, UIF and Compensation Fund, they will allocate money to the PIC for the PIC to invest it in the listed and the unlisted companies. And on the listed side, it's 95% of the money goes there, 5% goes to the unlisted. And on the listed, we have performed above the benchmark, which means that the returns for our clients, the workers, are good. And of course, we've had challenges which led to the Mpati Commission on the unlisted side, which is 5%, still significant in terms of the money that is deployed in that asset class.
Let's start with the management issues, the leadership issues. How much progress have you made there? Getting the right people in place, cleaning the place up, getting rid, of people who were implicated, making sure that due processes are followed whenever anything happens. What have you done there?
So the C-suite, right? Everyone will start with the chief something in at that level of management, starting from the CEO, the chief executive officer, the CIO, chief investment officer, chief risk officer, all of them, chief operating officer, all those positions are filled except the chief financial officer. We're just waiting for a date to conduct interviews. We're shortlisted. We're ready to fill all the positions in the C-suite.
And your CEO will be back soon. There are no issues there.
So the CEO has not been well. He's been on the sick leave, but he's been recovering very well. and it will be back on the 20th of June.
Let's talk about recovery of monies, because the Commission did say every effort should be made to recover money. So people who should pay back the money should indeed do so. It's workers' money after all.
I think we're making progress, and our approach is that where we can reach out-of-court settlements with regard to the bad investments that we made, we should do so speedily. But the principle is that we should recover as much as possible for the workers, and where we've got disagreements with the owners of those companies in which the PIC invested, the matters will be resolved in court. You'll be aware by now that we have settled with some of the companies. For instance, Lancaster, they've paid us back the 6 billion as the PIC, and there's a process to finalize the settlement with Steinhoff. So we are making progress insofar as resolving the issues that arose out of the bad investment that we've had in the recent years.
How much are we looking at in bad investments, more or less?
Oh, so Steinhoff, for instance, I think it was 27 billion. And that one, there was a company that we funded so that it can buy shares in Steinhoff, and I think it was about 9 billion. And others, they range from 100 and something million to 4 billion, around there, which I think I can go through each one of them.
No, let's not go into detail of IOs and a whole host of other people. But how confident are you that whatever you've been able to put in place up until now will take care of most or the bulk of what happened when there was an absence of good governance, people are taking bad decisions, and so on. In other words, with what you've done since the report was published about 2 years ago, would you say that the chances of those wrongs happening again are slim or non-existent even?
But I think what we've done, right, we are appointing people with integrity, with good ethics, and that is very, very critical. I mean, we've just appointed a CIO and other executives at that level, and we're putting system in place and policies that will ensure that there's proper governance, and including making sure that the organizational structure of the PIC, it does promote good governance. For instance, we have separated the role of the CEO from the CIO, because in the recent past, the two roles were merged, and that's partly where a lot of problems basically arose. So I think we're doing a lot in making sure that there's good systems, and also encourage the environment in which there's no fear. Our employees, they can speak their mind on issues that they think they are not going all right. But I think it is beyond the PIC to make sure that what we're doing is sustained and is defended. We do need Parliament that will hold us accountable. We do need the media and the civil society that will make sure that we are held accountable, because if it wasn't for the active civil society, including the media, which has held the public representatives and boards of different entities accountable, I think the state capture would have gone deeper.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's talk about going forward. Part of your strategy, you were told, is that you're going to increase investments in non-listed companies. That's going to create jobs. Obviously, you're also going to make money for your workers and investors. And among the things that Judge Mpati and his team said or put out there was that it cannot be, that's not something to be assumed. In other words, you say, because I have invested so much money, I've upped my investment when it comes to non-listed companies, that's automatically going to create jobs, because that was used in part as a smokescreen to like hide, all these wrongs. So what mechanisms or measures are you putting in place to ensure that where you put investors' money, it's not going to disappear or go to terrible investments?
I mean, firstly, the growth of the unlisted side, right? It's a global phenomenon. It's going around 20 to 25% towards the unlisted, and it's a global trend. And the part of the reason why we think that we should increase the unlisted side is because at that level, you are impacting directly on the economy. You're not just changing ownership shares from one owner to the other. You're basically investing in changing the economy. But secondly, when you get into the unlisted side, or if you increase the unlisted side, you are in a better position to influence the strategy of that company in terms of it generating better returns as well as transformation. And if you are to look at Africa, you want to increase your participation in Africa, which is quite critical, because if we were to rebuild the continent, South Africa needs to play a critical role in that regard. And in the continent, the stock exchanges are very underdeveloped and undeveloped in many respects. And therefore, for us to increase our role in Africa, it would be important that we are allowed to increase the unlisted side. And of course, you don't say, just you correctly say, just because it's unlisted, therefore the returns are guaranteed. You've got to make sure that governance, proper governance, it's enforced, and the way you constitute your boards, these boards are made up of people of integrity and people who are quite strong, because at the end of the day, we've got to make sure that workers get better returns out of those investments.
And that's important, both like boards, for example. I mean, you are a deputy minister, but also the chairperson of the PIC. I mean, you would have known, this is a history, that there are people who are questioning that arrangement, saying it kind of puts the PIC in a bit of an awkward position where, politically powerful people may lean on executives and whoever else has to take decisions. And at times, political decisions may just be taken instead of, investment decisions. I'm saying investment decisions. And I'm saying this also on the back of what you said today in Parliament about, the role of the state. In fact, let's play that clip before you answer this very same question, something you said while you were speaking to the Select Committee earlier today.
There are people who believe that, no, the state should not get involved in the redistribution of resources. The market will solve these problems. Just allow the market to operate, and all these racial inequalities, gender inequalities, class inequalities will be solved through the process of free market, and the market will solve this issue. And this is not to say you don't need the role of the market. You do need the market to play its role, but you also need the role of the state.
So managing that balance, ensuring that people like you are not overbearing, you don't lean on executives to take political decisions instead of, investment decisions. How does your system sort of take care of those fears, real or perceived, but how do you take care of those fears?
I think the fears are founded and that they are understandable. But I think it's important to also understand that some of the bad decisions that were taken by boards in other entities, the board chairpersons and board members were, if you like, non-political people, but they took terrible decisions. So I think for me, it does seem to boil down to the integrity of the people who are put on those boards, whether they are politicians or non-politicians. And I think people should judge us on the basis of our performance and conduct, than because otherwise we'll have to say, in that case, bad things happened, and that person was not a political person like me. But they basically took bad decisions. Because my view is that decision making is a political process. Because politics is about using power to allocate certain resources. It could be allocating people in certain positions. It could be allocating money in certain companies. And the question that we should be, or the issue that we should be focusing on, is how do we put our right politics in all our institutions, regardless of whether this person is a public representative or non-public representative. Because at the end of the day, we all allocate resources every day. We all make decisions every day. And those decisions are political, because for me, politics take place in all spheres of society, even in church.
Well, let's continue in that vein and talk about the allocation of public resources broadly. I think it was a couple of weeks ago you were in Parliament, and you were asked, the whole range of questions about a lot of things that were, or that are still, in fact, happening. And you had a few sort of anecdotal references to certain situations in the public space. One of them was Nelson Mandela Bay. They're facing day zero. There was a feeling that they could access some conditional grants, to help alleviate the situation there. And you made a point about the fact that at the time, there were two people claiming to be municipal managers. So who was going to account for it? And it would have been irresponsible, of Treasury to just give money, to those people, even though they were in need, given the fact that no one was going to account for that. How worried are you as Treasury about this phenomenon? Because it's growing and growing. The finance minister last week was asked about the floods in eThekwini in particular, and where you're saying, but people haven't done what what is expected of them. It's filling in the form, making a case for how much you should get, to pay for what, and so on. So how then, was this, I think, rhetorical question, do you then give, money when people haven't followed processes?
If we were to go back to the Nelson Mandela example, for me, what that case illustrates is that as political leadership, firstly, we need to put the interest of our communities first, because there's a lot of infights there around the who should be the, amongst other things, who should be the municipal manager. This was this one correctly appointed. And they took the matter to court, and the court said, you know what, you've got to do what you ought to do, sort out this problem. It's a political problem. Don't throw political issues into the judiciary. Sort it out. So they threw it back, that sort out this problem yourself. And I think if we don't get our politics right, there is no way we're going to get our municipalities right. There's no way in which we're going to appoint right people into these positions for them to carry out the mandate of these public institutions. Because if you look at one of the municipalities that I referred to, the Metro, in which, again, the allocation of resources, instead of allocating more money towards the technical services department so that you appoint someone who will sort out the sewers there, who will make sure that infrastructure, water is sorted out. What do we do as politicians? We allocate money towards support staff.
Our advisors
and all that. And again, it goes back to the point about we've got to take political responsibility as political representative. And National Treasury, those spheres of government, they've got original powers. A council has original powers to decide how you allocate those resources. If you don't do what you ought to do, there is no way the Minister of Finance will come in and take over your responsibilities. And of course, unless you breach certain financial processes, and even there, the minister has to get the permission of cabinet to do so. But can you imagine if we were to take all these 200 and something municipalities because they are not functional? There's no way that we can take over the responsibilities of local government as a whole. So we really have to sort our politics right. The other technical issues, they'll be much, much easier to solve. There's day zero problems, sorting out the disaster. As long as we don't sort out our politics, it's going to be very difficult for us to solve the technical problems.
But then, I mean, there are certain realities of things that we know without anyone even telling us. For example, you have two people calling themselves municipal managers because, one faction or group, has tied its fortunes, to the one municipal manager or the other. So they will do everything in their power to steer things in their direction because it means access to money. It's that simple. Now, what levers then do you still have as Treasury, for example? Where are you able to say, no, but this can't continue because if there's no accountability, then we can't put public money in there. Let's say the politicians aren't taking, the right decisions, as you said was the case in Mangaung, for example. So what then do you have? How do you whip them into line? How do you get them to do the right thing?
One of the measures...
Or can you?
Yes, we can. The Constitution empowers us to withhold the transfer of funds under those conditions, and there's other constitutional instruments that enable the government at the national level even to dissolve those municipalities. There are other provisions, for instance, in this case of Nelson Mandela Metro, where I think Section 63, which enabled the Department of Water to take that function. But unfortunately, there's certain decisions that still need to be taken by the council for that Section 63 to be effective so that the people of Nelson Mandela will have access to water or avoid the day zero situation.
But do you feel you have enough as Treasury, or there's enough in the system to actually stop the rot? Is there enough? And I'm saying this, tomorrow the Auditor General is releasing the report into municipalities. I can bet you now it's not going to get better. I mean, the last Auditor General report said the crop of councillors that just left before the elections left that space worse than it had ever been in the years of and it's not going to get better tomorrow. I think we're going to get just as bad a report, if not worse. Which then
it looks like you've seen the report already.
No, because there's no evidence in the system. I mean, remember there was this Africa report about a week ago as well, which painted another bleak picture. So there's no way that in this period over the past years, there's no evidence that in the system that the situation has gotten better. So what still needs to be done? I think is the question. Tom, as people in the know, clever people say, to think outside of the box. Is there still a box, there outside to think out of, and what? Because we can't keep lamenting. We're gonna. You'll see tomorrow. All of us are going to lament the bad state, of municipalities in the country. But
I think for me, because all this a consequence. These are aftermath of the certain things that happen in local government. And therefore, we need to ask, why do we continue to have these outcomes? And by and large, and I really want to go back to this point about the political leadership, and therefore we've got to say, who should qualify to be a councillor? Who should qualify to be the mayor? Because it does look like the processes that we have put in place, the criteria according to which people get into this position, does not seem to produce good results. And therefore, in thinking out of the box, we've got to pose a couple of questions on whether shouldn't we think differently about who qualifies to be a mayor, who qualifies to be a councillor, who qualifies to be an MMC, a member of the mayoral committee, and not just at the local government level, but also at the provincial level and national level. And I do think that we now need to really have to think about the criteria that need to be set for anyone to qualify. It cannot be right that we have instances where someone can't even read the documents that come from officials and is expected to lead an institution, and that institution has huge implications for the people of that locality, but also for the country. I mean, if you look at Nelson Mandela, for instance, you've got multinational companies there. You've got VW, you've got the Chinese automotive company, you've got Ford engine plant. So if something goes wrong there, and investment decisions have to be made in the US on whether you should continue with that plant at Nelson Mandela, people will say, no, there's no provision of water. There's poor governance there. So we've got to think very hard about what type of political leadership we require in this institution. And we really have to think differently about what type of people do we need to basically put there. Because every day to see some of these situations, like in Nelson Mandela, it's quite painful that we can't just resolve basic things that we should be resolving, partly because of certain vested interests that we have, narrow interests that we have as public representatives. Something has to give.
Wear your political hat for a second, whether it's your SACP hat or your ANC hat. Do you think this political system is ever going to give us? I mean, look at the politics we're talking about now. You know, none of that is really serving the interests of the country. So, do you think we're ever going to get to a situation where the political system gives us the things you're saying?
I'm very optimistic, Budvuyo. I think, wearing my political hat now for the ANC, I think in this local government election 2021, we began to set some criteria according to which people have to be councillors. People were interviewed to be mayors, and I'm not saying that the system was perfect, but in the next round, we've got to add more measures and put some instruments to make sure that the system gives us a better quality public representative. We might not have addressed all the shortcomings.
So let's keep on nudging.
Let's keep on nudging.
And not turn things upside down, you know, or be radical about it.
No, we need to be radical. But of course, in the process of reform, there's always resistance because there's vested interests. Whatever reform that you put in place, you are upsetting certain vested interests in the system.
Hello, thank you for coming through.
Thank you so much.
Well appreciated. As the Deputy Minister of Finance, he is also, of course, the chairperson of the PIC. They appeared before Parliament today to report on progress made since the Party Commission about 2 years ago, when the report was released, said these are some of the things that you need to do. You're talking about more than 2 trillion of workers' money there that has to be money so that it makes more money for workers, for their pensions, and so on. So it's a very important institutions, of course, to take the opportunity to talk about broad governance issues. Couldn't help, especially on the eve of that Auditor General report coming out tomorrow, for which we'll tell you about throughout the day. And of course, here on the program, I'll be speaking to the Auditor General herself. Up next, opposition party, the ATM, wastes no time in resubmitting a motion calling for a parliamentary probe into President Cyril Ramaphosa's Palapala farm saga. But will the new motion get the National Assembly Speaker's nod this time around? That's what we're going to find out. Welcome back. Well, two decisions announced by the National Assembly Speaker, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, over the past 24 hours. One, authorizing that a probe be instituted to look into this incident.
Any member who is interfering with the removal of those
Speaker, why are male security touching the female MP?
To this speaker, you'll account to this thing, the chaos he has started.
Hey, you, Pumani Nobabini, Puman, this is your legacy, Puman, this is your legacy. You abuse
Pumani.
Well, activist advocate Brenda Madumise Pajibo is on standby for a conversation on some of the deeper and troubling issues that episode raised. But first, we start with the second issue that the National Assembly Speaker also ruled on. Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula turned down opposition parties, the African Transformation Movement and the United Democratic Movement requests for Parliament to investigate President Cyril Ramaphosa over his Farmgate scandal. Hours later, the ATM submitted another motion after the Speaker ruled that the initial one was not accompanied by substantive motions, as requested by the Assembly rules. But will this one crack it? Well, Vuyile Tuzungula is the president of the ATM, and he joins me on the line. Good evening, sir. Thanks very much for your time. What have you done differently this time around?
Basically, Budvuyo, we've done what the Speaker requested, that we submit a substantive motion in line with the rules of Parliament, taking to account what the rules say when it comes to submissions of a substantive motion. And we were very clear, we submitted supporting documentation when it comes to the transgressions that we believe there are serious misconduct that require Parliament to look into the misconduct by President Ramaphosa, so that a Section 89 committee can be formed and it can start its work, because this is what the Constitution requires of us as members of Parliament, that whenever such things arise, we need to act in this particular fashion. Why didn't you do that the first time around? We did exactly that, Budvuyo. However, as you will recall, that, you know, the Speaker or the chairpersons of Parliament, they require documentations to be in a particular format, to have particular elements in all the communication. It's the same thing that happened in 2020 when we had our motion of no confidence, where the Speaker said, fine, your letter is correct, however, it needs to be in this particular order, in order for it to meet the certain threshold for a motion of no confidence. It is the same thing even now, where she wanted our letter to have certain elements in order to meet the threshold of the rules, in order to meet in order for it to be a substantive motion that is required in accordance to the rules. Well, I mean, the ANC is in the majority by far, and we know, because this has happened in the past, they can use their numbers to block it. What happens? Do you have a plan of action in the event that indeed is what happens? Firstly, Budvuyo, we need to repeat, and hopefully the public will get to understand, the issue of the serious allegations against a certain sitting president. They are very, very serious. They are very, very important, which cannot be let, it can't be as normal in our country. And Parliament has been lambasted in the past by the judiciary, by the public, as if it is a parliament that is not acting in the best interest of the people, parliament that is not holding the executive accountable. Therefore, it is in that spirit as the ATM where we are bringing about this substantive motion so that Parliament is able to act and fulfill its obligation of looking into these transgressions against a sitting president. We've never witnessed a sitting president being accused of bribery, money laundering, being accused of tax evasion, of torturing. So it's very serious. Therefore, the ANC, with their majority, if they decide to either try to frustrate us, we are going to keep on pushing, because what is important for us is that Parliament must do its oversight function as espoused by the Constitution.
Okay, and that's where we're going to leave it. Thank you very much for your time, Mr. Zungula. He is the president of the African Transformation Movement. Their first motion was, of course, rejected, and hours later, they did resubmit. As Mr. Zungula says, this one is in line with the National Assembly rules, which was the requirement before it could even be considered. We'll see how this one pans out. But let's go to this other conversation now. Also emanating from the Speaker of the National Assembly's decision to authorize a probe into what we saw in Parliament last week. During the 2 days, Parliament was supposed to debate the Presidency's budget vote, and the EFF tried to stop the proceedings. Have a look again.
Any member who is interfering with the removal of those
Speaker, why are male security touching the female MP?
To this speaker, you will account.
Of course, as many of you would have seen or know, there were even more hectic visuals from during those scenes, the 2 days that Parliament, the National Assembly, was supposed to debate the debate of the presidency. Lots of people have been talking about, who would have seen women MPs being thrown out, some falling, but also some of the parliamentary security detail also finding themselves in similar situations. But Advocate Brenda Madumisa Pajibo is an activist. She's been doing this for a good number of years, getting the president to sit up and take note on gender-based violence issues. Let me start by asking what you thought when you saw those scenes I've just described, which we may not have captured well in the clips we're able to show tonight.
I was disgusted. For the simple reason that these are lawmakers. They had just a year ago passed 3 pieces of legislation on gender-based violence. They had had a session on gender-based violence as a country. We need to reckon with the reality of the sketch. They had a debate on it. And then you turn around and behave in the manner that you did. What does it mean to us, ordinary South Africans, who placed our hope in the elected officials to conduct themselves in a particular way? So for me, and that's why we wrote the letter that we wrote to the Speaker. And we're very clear, don't apologize, because it's not going to help us. You're making a mockery of it if you are going to come back and apologize. Don't issue statements. We are done, we've passed that point. It's for you to reckon with what justice means in this circumstance. That you saw it fit to be violent. And we're not going to talk about who started and why. Because once we do that, you run the risk of justifying and condoning and minimizing and trivializing violence in this country. So I'm not prepared to hear anybody telling me, oh, but they said it. I don't care. What I care about is that violence was displayed in full view of the populace. And we expect young men and women in this country to behave differently. And we ask ourselves, why are we this violent as a nation? So it was there in full view. So we're not surprised.
It reminds you of an old teacher who used to say, leadership is judged as much by the things you do as it is judged by the things that you don't do. So if you've decided to be a leader, then you must know that you have that responsibility.
And you said a mouthful by saying that statement. And I think they need to ask themselves that difficult questions. Are they leaders? Are they exemplary? Is this conduct? And so the first time, by the way, right? And I went back to look at other debates that happens where there's robust engagement in Parliament, where they differ, where they call each other names. And I've realized that it has never gotten to this point of the violence, but when there's an issue with the presidents, right? We went through, yeah. So why is it that we protect this power in this manner, and we even want to be violent in protecting the power? This is an institution that is powerful in itself, right? And it has easily, and it has demonstrated that it can abuse its power and authority. And they've done that by being violent to their own members. Surely the Speaker and everyone else in that Parliament, the 400 members, were fully aware that by the time this debate was going to happen, there was just going to be an issue with it, right? How do you plan for it?
Yes.
Huh?
You see, that's exactly what we spoke about last week, or just tried to talk about last week. We've seen this movie. It has played itself over and over again. Right? By now, someone, certainly in the position of your presiding officer, should have thought of things, ways within the law, without the optics you're talking about,
Absolutely.
of ensuring, that what needs to happen, happens. And no one gets away with murder, literally. But on the other hand, you cannot justify the fact that someone else started it and then make that the excuse for encouraging what is wrong, or allowing even what was wrong to happen.
Precisely, and if you wanted the president to be free to give the debate without any hindrance or disturbance, you could have gone back to your virtual hearings, correct?
Yeah. In fact, I thought, I remember the day before, the presidential spokesperson repeating a line that sounded a bit, I thought, maybe they'll put him in some room, perhaps somewhere, where isolated, and no one will physically come and prevent him from addressing. But it sounded, it was a bit cryptic, about it. And I was like, so what does this mean? I said, maybe they have a plan. But on the day when what happened, and then the next day it happens again. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, where does it put us as Africans? And I've been watching how we want to justify violence. And that saddens me. Because no human being deserves to be violated. None whatsoever. No matter what I have done to you. If I take you on, Vuyo, and I scream at you, your response should be screaming too, right? Because I have not taken out a gun. I have not taken out a knife. I have not given you my fist. I have shouted and screamed at you. The response surely should be the same, and scream at me, and we are done, and you walk away. But it can't be when I disagree with you, and because you can't win the argument with me, you resort to this violence.
Was this about disagreement, though?
No.
Or was it about, entrenched
attitudes,
views that even if I'm aware, that what I'm about to do or what I'm about to allow to happen, so people understand me because thugs.
Yeah. We call them thugs, right?
Yeah, they shouldn't, be allowed to get away with it. So I'm trying to say, because of attitudes, like entrenched attitudes, views that are not going to change. Talk about your gender-based violence some other day. This is not about it.
Yeah.
This is not what, entrenches, violence and intimidation. No, it's about dealing with people who are silly.
Exactly.
And that's what we're doing here.
And
I think that's what made Parliament sort of get away with
it for the longest of time. And I think now the Speaker had to pause for a second and realize that my response has to be different, right? Because the public is expecting something different after these 2 episodes, right? So we were pleasantly surprised when she said that she's going to embark on an investigation to establish the true facts of what transpired, right? Because we have already told them, don't come and apologize, right? Deal with the violence that we're subjected to as a nation. And they need to be honest with themselves on why they resort to that kind of violence as lawmakers. And I need to emphasize that point. They are lawmakers. They tell us on a daily basis why we need to change our conduct and attitudes around violence and gender-based violence, and why this country cannot continue to be in a violent state that it is. So if we were to change it, surely it should start there. The fish rots from the head. And if this fish is rotten with violence, we've got no hope in hell.
And they do have a responsibility. In other words, that's something they should outsource.
No.
You know, say, because I'm stuck today, I don't know where to go next.
Yeah.
And so let it be someone else's problem.
Yeah.
In fact, it reminds me, like back in the day, I think I saw a report in Parliament. There were proposals for changes to domestic laws as they affect domestic workers, but also farm workers later on, and so on. And I remember this mama who came to the portfolio committee on labor. I think Minister Membatis Mdladlana.
Ooh, that was a long time ago. Yeah, Jesus,
so
you've been around.
And she was like, like big, imposing, very strong boned, and very. And then she just stood up and said, Minister, don't I wake up early in the morning, 3 hours of the morning, get a breakfast ready, iron your children's clothes, you know, and so on. You wake up, prepare your breakfast and all of that, prepare your kids, they go to school, you all leave me. You go, we come here to Parliament and deal with the stuff I'm asking you to do now, while I'm taking care of your house. You know, back I'm at home. You come back, I've cooked for you, you're ready, you're going to sleep in a nice, clean place. And then the next day, you know, it's going. Now, all I'm asking is that because I've freed you to go and make the laws that are going to make my life, you know, simpler or easier, you do what you need to do. You do what you chose to do. I chose to. I'm a domestic worker, perhaps not by choice, you know, but I'm here now. But I'm asking you now to be, you know, to treat me the way I deserve to be treated.
Yeah.
So it can't be an excuse that we don't know what to do.
No, they know.
We don't know what to do with the people who are next to us, whom we don't like or don't appreciate what they are doing. We don't know what to do, even with how to deal with gender-based violence, what to do with unemployment in the country, what to do with inequality. The list can
If they don't know, they must ship out. If they truly do not know, they must ship out. If they cannot see that this was violence, right? And what it says about them as lawmakers, then there's a fundamental problem with the kind of leaders we have.
But the thing is, I mean, we say this, we're aware of this, we keep saying this over and over again. The Deputy Minister was sitting there.
And he says, judge us on our conduct and performance, right?
You see?
Yeah.
But then, he's also the first to admit, you know, that the political system that they're part of, or that they've designed, which works for them at certain times, doesn't work for the rest of us other times, you know, is fraught with problems.
True.
But when you say, what do we do now? Because we can't keep postponing and postponing the problem. We have to keep nudging them. You know,
but what is missing here is accountability. In this country, people refuse to take accountability, even if they're wrong. They refuse completely to be accountable And maybe we don't have the same understanding of what accountability means, right? When you say you have oversight, what do you mean you have oversight? And when I've asked you to account as a citizen, and I'm asking you, an elected official, to account for your conduct, then if you don't understand what we're asking and you need to respond, and we're still waiting for the speaker and the many other political parties that we wrote to respond, right? Because it starts with those small things, that when a citizen raises a concern, the decent thing to do is to say, acknowledge receipt of your correspondence. It's receiving attention.
So I have to ask you what,
Yeah?
about the thing that started it all,
Yeah.
where someone said, I just want you to answer questions about what happened. What would you do? What would we have done if you were him? Or what do you think the president should have done?
Anticipation, right? So they knew, right? So you're asking me now, what would have I done? I would have engaged. Let me hear you. What is the point of order that you are raising? And if you want to raise 20 point of orders, I'm going to indulge you to raise those point of orders and let them be responded to, right? If we are going to finish here at midnight, let it be, because we are about a transparent and accountable government. We say that all the time. So be open and transparent. There's nothing to hide. Ask me those questions. There's no rush in you passing the budget. You'll pass your budget. But answer the questions, because we are saying to you, you are tainted. You can't answer these questions. You can't debate. You can't respond until you respond to these questions. And we think you don't deserve, actually, to be standing at the podium. You need to then put your point across and say, I deserve to be on the podium for the following reasons. For me, that engagement should have ensued, and robustly so, right? You can't run away from it. You can't use violence to silence people. You can't. And it shouldn't have happened. What are we protecting? That's what I want to know. What are we protecting? The entire parliament, including the speaker, had nothing to lose by hearing those points of orders. They irritate you. They are a nuisance. That's part of what you have, this kind of democracy.
Okay, thank you very much. Well appreciated the time.
Thank you for the time.
Brenda Madumise-Pajibu, my guest this evening. And that's all we have time for. To join us again tomorrow night, we'll be speaking to the Auditor General of South Africa about municipal reports coming out tomorrow. Have a good night.